So I'd like to welcome everyone to Connecting Learners in the Great Outdoors with Becky Kennedy and Tanya Trembath. It's always great to see people from all over Ontario joining us for the OCS Connect sessions, and we're going to have a wonderful evening learning about connecting learners in the great outdoors with Becky and Tanya. So I'm going to turn it over to them.
Hello, thank you. Hello, everybody. So my name is Becky Kennedy, and I'm an early years facilitator with the Simcoe County District School Board, and I'm working tonight with...
Hi, this is Tanya Trembath, and I'm a kindergarten teacher. I work at Hewitt's Creek in Barrie, Ontario.
We're really excited to share with you guys tonight about, really it's about a lot of the work that Tanya has done with her students. So we're really pumped to be able to share that with you, what's worked for her and how we can use that, or you can use that in your own practice. To get us started, we actually have a video that we'd like to use to frame your thinking. It's the voice of Richard Louv, who is really one of my inspirations when it comes to outdoor learning. And it's 2 minutes and 21 seconds long, not very long, but it really helps to frame our mind. And I think Mally is going to press play on that. You actually don't have to leave. You just get to watch it right on here, which is new to me. So I'll let that go, and we'll meet you back in just a second. So we feel a little bit as though we could be finished for this evening. We can just leave it there. And if you haven't had the opportunity to watch the movie that this is the trailer for, it's called Nature Play. We actually showed it with our school board last year, and it was just absolutely phenomenal. So if you ever get a chance to take a look, for sure, please do so. A couple of things we're going to focus on this evening, really it comes back to this global research evidence. So thinking about the link between nature and academic achievement, how we can help our students to stay focused and be calm, alert, and learning, the link to self-regulation. The fact that you can do this anywhere, you can get your students outside, and we'll show you a wide range of spaces and places where you can do that, connecting to any curriculum. And as well, again, coming back to helping them to become competent and capable, or they already are competent and capable, but supporting that growth, as well as thinking about the 4 frames for sure of the kindergarten program, but then thinking forward to the links in our grade 1 to 3 curriculums as well, and how we can provide all those things together. So we do hope to do that this evening. So we are basing everything we're talking about on research, and this came from ParticipACTION Survey, a report card for the health of our students. And really the biggest risk, absolutely, is keeping our kids indoors. And what's going to happen right now is Mally's going to put a link in the chat stream, and we're going to give you some time to dig into this document, really focusing on the position paper, paying particular attention, to pages 4 and 5, really where they get into the position statement on active outdoor play, what's important and what are the recommendations. We're going to give you 10 minutes to do that, so lots of time to read it. We're going to come back together at 7:45. While you're reading that, though, we'd like to know what is sticking with you. So if you want to use that text box tool along the left-hand side of your screen, feel free to type right into the box there some of the things that are sticking with you as you're reading through that. So we're going to give you 10 minutes. Again, to do that, we'll come back together at 7:45, and then we'll talk to some of the things that stick with you. Hi everyone, we're going to come back together in about 3 or 4 more minutes. You're probably still reading through that, but feel free to take a look, especially on page 4 and 5, and look for those recommendations, and then just add your thoughts to our screen here. Welcome back, everyone. Please feel free to keep typing onto the screen here. Lots of excellent thoughts and lots of excellent things that have stuck with you.
So many of the comments are things that we had been talking about on our own as well, and so much of this we know. We grew up playing outside. We grew up with a lot more freedom. So a lot of these trends that we're seeing in the other direction, we can see why that is. We're swinging too far in the opposite direction.
Some of the interesting, points that stuck with me as well was the one about children being more likely to be hurt in a motor vehicle as a passenger than playing outside on foot or on a bike. And the other one was about abduction, which was a little bit scary, but children are not likely to be abducted just on the street. That's not very likely to happen. So these things that we say, what if, are things that really aren't happening very often.
And consider the risk or danger of spending so much time on a screen. That's where they can encounter predators and dangerous situations.
Absolutely. And later on, we're going to talk about the link between that and it's something called mismatch theory. Really rethinking the way we were built and some of the processes and structures we have in society and how that's really affecting our children. I really like that point too about the difference between danger and risk. Mm-hmm. That we'll talk about as time goes on for sure as well.
Yes, when we're supervising children, when we're playing with children, we have to think ahead, and we'll talk about that a little in a little bit. But yeah, I agree. Looking at danger, we're not going to put children in the path of danger, but there may be risk involved. And when is it? What's the phrase? Oh, safe enough to say yes.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things we often think about is it's normal for children to get bumps and bruises and breaks. Those are all things that are normal, and they teach us about safe risk and about knowing our limits. And one of the things that the paper sort of points out is that that's actually causing future problems. It's causing mental health issues because our students aren't learning their limits and knowing about what that looks like and feels like.
And looking to somebody else to help them with that.
Absolutely. Thanks, everyone. So if you read further into that position paper, you'll see some of the actual grades that we received as a whole. And one of those ones was on overall physical activity, and we received a grade of D-. One of the things that we think about there is the change over time in the distance where children have been able to travel. So you think about back in 1919. So let's think about great-grandfather George, and how far he was able to travel. So he had to travel almost 10 kilometers. He was allowed to do that to go fishing. Then when we get to grandfather in 1950, his distance traveled decreased to only 1.6 kilometers. So within 40 years, or 30 years, sorry, that was a huge shift to begin with. And then between that, so father in 1979, he only traveled 800 meters distance around his house. That was likely in his neighborhood, and that was likely the case for most of us growing up. And then in D, so the child, he's only traveling 300 meters. That's not even enough to leave his own yard in front of his house, depending on where you live. That's as far as children are allowed to go. And we think about the impact that that's having on them. So as of 2008, for the first time in human history, more people now live in cities than in the countryside. So the barrier is not just the city, but it's also the absence of nature in the city. Poor design of cities, neighborhoods, homes, schools, workplaces, all of those things are affecting our ability to have free range really over where we go. We're losing urban parkland, destruction of natures with neighborhoods, right? And we can see that happening. Movement is closely related to children's social and emotional growth. Being able to do something well makes a child feel confident. It boosts their self-esteem and sense of well-being, giving them a feeling of I can do it, which is vital really to later learning. Vigorous movement is also crucial for children's health. Recent studies have shown that young children nowadays are not getting enough exercise to promote health in later life, as we saw in the position paper earlier. It's part of our health policy now to promote exercise and develop good exercise habits in children, and things like physical literacy, knowing how their bodies move in space. And we know the impact that can have on their fitness and health. Today, when there are fewer and fewer opportunities for safe, child-initiated play, rich outdoor play becomes more important in fostering some of these essential aspects of childhood, such as freedom and spontaneity. Outdoor play can offer safe opportunities for children to take risks, to try things out, to develop confidence, and to express their exuberance, really in sheer joy of being outside. And I'm sure you've seen that as you take any of your students outside, that the difference in mood, it can be felt the moment they walk outside that door. We're also thinking, too, about the link between being outside and self-regulation and the impact of stress on our students. So stress is anything that disrupts our body's need for a stable internal environment and requires a person to burn energy in order to get back to that base point. So we all know things that stress us out and can identify things that regularly cause us stress in our daily lives. But to understand the concept of self-regulation, we want to expand what that definition of stress looks like. So there's somebody named Walter Cannon who developed this definition. He was interested in how an organism has to burn energy to maintain homeostasis, or a stable internal environment. So what do I mean by this? Well, let's suppose we set our thermostat in our home to 20 degrees. The thermostat will click on when the temperature drops to about 17 degrees and will click off when it rises above 22, maintaining that stable internal environment in our homes. So let's apply the same concept to your bodies. We have an internal temperature of about 37 degrees, like a home furnace. If our body temperature drops too low, our brain will send signals to our bodies that are designed to generate heat. So our teeth will chatter, or maybe we'll shiver. When the body gets too hot, the brain sends signals to cool us down. So we might sweat, maybe we'll have to sit down. And in order to do this, our body is burning energy. So what Walter Cannon was saying is stress is anything that disrupts that internal homeostasis and requires us to burn energy in order to get back to that base point. So in humans, stress is experienced in 5 different domains. And you can find out more about this if you go to the Merit Center website, and we'll add that to the resources at the end. It's www.self-reg.ca, but we'll add that to the end. The biological stressors are like hunger and thirst, illness and sensory inputs, emotional stress like sadness or excitement, cognitive stress like communicating, paying attention, or switching our attention, social stressors like a fight with a spouse, or maybe trying to keep up with the Joneses, maybe just being in a room with 20 to 30 other kindergarten kids. And pro-social stressors, which pertain to how we deal with other people's stress or empathy. And when we use this definition of stress, we notice that there's a lot of stress in today's world. And the way we are living really only adds to that stress. And this will help us to link to our thinking about outdoor learning in a little bit. So there's this theory called Mismatch Theory. And what that means really is adopting an evolutionary lens to understand the needs of the human body and how aspects of modern life might be neglecting and quite possibly even subverting those needs. So including the needs of the human brain, for example. So we think about these 9 major stressors that are part of this mismatch theory. Basically what it means is our bodies have been designed to react and behave in a certain way, but the way that evolution has progressed over time, and the way that our cities have built up, and the way that our lifestyles have changed, have caused this mismatch between the way we were built and the way we're living now. So these 9 major stressors, lack of exercise, urbanization, nature deficit, super stimulants, video games, social media, lack of community and family stress, are having a huge impact on what we're doing. You'll notice that lack of exercise, nature deficit, lack of community and urbanization, those are huge impacts. So half of those 9 major stressors can be alleviated by spending more time outside. Not to mention that will also alleviate the video game situation there, and social media stressors, and increase our ability to receive high quality sleep as well. One of the things that we talked about earlier was the impact of video games on students who aren't spending time, children who aren't spending time outside, are increasing their time watching television and playing video games. And that's having a direct impact on their ability to sleep, but also their ability to cope with stress. So one of the things that we're learning now is that students who are playing video games, and you'll notice this in your guys coming into your classrooms, students who are playing on video games in the evening, let's say, for example, they're playing a video game with some shooting in it. We're hoping our kids don't play Call of Duty, but that might be what they're either playing or seeing. That's causing their body to go in something called fight or flight. So before they go to bed, their body is reacting as if they were getting ready to, if it was thinking about evolutionary times, to interact with a bear or something scary. Their body's getting ready to do that. Every time you turn on a video game, your body's getting to that same stressed out space where you're really thinking about, I need to be ready, I need to be prepared to fight or flight. And that's directly impacting their sleep. Their stress levels have gone up, they can't get enough sleep, they're waking up tired, and it continues and goes on and on and on. It takes 4 to 6 hours from when you finish playing a video game for your body to come back down. And we know that there's not a lot of time in the day. So this is something that we want to really have a background understanding in and think about as we're moving forward.
I also think about when they are playing video games, what are the things that they are not doing? They're not interacting with their family. They're not having conversations, singing songs, looking at each other. So I'm sure many of you can agree that we're seeing this in the children that are coming through our doors in September. Looking at social skills and getting back to those basics of things that we used to do with children.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm sure these are stressors that you can even identify right in yourself. Family stress, lack of community. And when we say super stimulants, we're meaning things like coffee and junk food and all those things that are really affecting our ability to cope with stress. So what we'd like to do now is we'd like to get some ideas from you guys about what your barriers are to getting outside. So thinking about barriers being, maybe it comes from administration, barriers yourself, barriers you're hearing from parents, because we'd like to work on addressing some of those throughout the rest of the presentation. And keep typing. We might chat as we see some of those barriers coming up as well. You folks are adding some excellent thoughts to there. We're just going to give you a few more minutes to type and think about that. Just a couple of minutes, and then we'll come back together. Okay. You have a lot to say. This is excellent. Lots of good questions and points that are being brought up for sure.
I would like to say that I have the same list of barriers. Like there's many things that are tricky when you're working outside so often. So yeah, we can get into some of them and discuss. As far as children coming to school prepared, depending on your school, that may mean more students than others that are coming to school unprepared. In our class, and it won't happen the first year, because you kind of have to build this up, we have like a bank of clothing and boots. So we ask parents to send in any clothing that doesn't fit, jackets, boots, whatnot. And also when the Lost and Found is getting carted out, I go and take whatever we need. We might have mitts or hats and things, wash them up, and then we have it ready to go for students who need them on that day.
And I've seen it at other schools who are in like more disadvantaged communities, that if you just connect with other schools in your school board, it's incredible how much people are willing to donate and how they're willing to share those resources. So sometimes it's just a matter of sending an email out or speaking to your administrator and getting them kind of to send an email out, make those connections too.
Washroom, yes. So we try to go out before. However, there invariably are some students who need to go back inside. Depending on where we are, it could mean just a walk in from the outdoor classroom, the far end of the schoolyard. It could be heading back from the forest. So depending on how many students have to go, we may have to cut our time outside a little bit. We do have one area that we call the far forest, and it does take 15 minutes to walk there, so it's a bit more of a production. We make sure everybody goes. We have snacks. We have what we need, and we haven't, I should knock wood, we haven't had any issues as of yet.
I just saw one that, the one, there's a really good point about kind of justifying really what we're doing, so people view it as just free time or play or extra recess. And then the other piece about making sure we have enough time inside to focus on literacy and math instruction. And so one of the things that we'll show you as the webinar goes on is how those things are linked together. So one of the things we do is we show the learning that's happening while we're outside. And that's a way sort of not just to justify ourselves, but to educate others as to the value of getting outside and the fact that anything you can do inside, absolutely you can do outside. But everything you can do outside, you can't always do inside. So that's something to consider as well.
That's true. Flight risk and students who require extra support. So I would say, depending on your level of comfort or the students you have that particular year, you may have to lean in a little bit more or less with your outside time and with the students you have, because you don't necessarily want to leave students out, but you have to be prepared with the students who are coming on a walk or heading to the forest. If there's a walker involved, maybe the forest is not something you can do every week, or a community walk if it will exhaust a student with some needs. So as much as you can at that time is better than nothing.
For sure. And one of the things that we'll talk about, I think, later on is the fact that, so when Tanya and I were preparing for this, one of the things she said was, well, we don't do it all right away. We build up. It's really intentional and really scaffolded as to how far they go and where they go and what they do. And so Tanya will show you what that looks like in all different areas sort of their schoolyard and their neighborhood, and how we can build up to that to be supportive of all students. I'm finding time within flow of the day for sure. There are many transitions, so we'll talk about that for sure.
And same with not a lot of outdoor space. You can just go outside in an enclosed area as well, and we'll get to that.
So I think we'll move on.
Can I just speak to the communication? Communication from inside school to the outside. That is a big one for me. So whether you're using your cell phone to call the school directly or you have a walkie system, I wouldn't be outside with 28 students if I didn't have communication with somebody, my partner, another class on the yard, or the office inside. So if that is something that is not available in your school, then you know, for the time being, you may need to stick close to home, stick close to the schoolyard.
One of the things we've seen over time is that so support from colleagues and men, families, is that as you start going outside, it builds on itself. And students, first of all, demands to start going outside more. You're going to start to see your colleagues bringing their classes outside more because they see the learning that's happening. So sometimes it just takes one courageous person not fighting the fight, but getting that started. And then that does start to build as time goes on.
And be patient with yourself. We had talked about you're not going to have this beautiful time in the forest right away. As I mentioned, just lean into it as much as you can, as much as you feel comfortable, because the moment you are feeling anxious and nervous and not in control of the situation, then that is when accidents will happen. So as long as you are comfortable.
One of the really things that I love that Tanya says a lot is that she's unapologetic about getting outside. That's what they do because, first of all, it's part of our program in the kindergarten program. So that's what they do, and people get on board. It's pretty incredible to see, and as we'll show you pictures as time goes on, but as well to hear what the parents have to say for sure about them being outside and the time spent there.
So when we're thinking about getting ready to take your class outside, I always think about start as you mean to go on. So if you would like to spend more time outdoors, then start that on your first day of school. If you're setting up the routines and letting parents know this is what this looks like and this is what we do every day. As far as a daily schedule, you're going to fit in how much time you're comfortable with, but really consider the transitions and how many times we ask students to take on and off clothing. So we start our day outside because they're coming to school already dressed for the weather, and if they're not, we have a few minutes that they can run in and grab their boots, or we can grab a hat for them, whatever they need, and we stay outside for that period. When we are heading out, we often have a backpack that we have things that we might need, Band-Aids, tissues. If we're going to the far forest, we're bringing snacks. It takes a lot of energy for these kids to be heading out into the forest and playing the whole time. Their little legs are just working so hard, so we provide snacks for them. Perhaps that's a barrier, depending on if you have allergies in the classroom, but working with the parents can help you with that. And the weather, of course. Even on our coldest days, we try to get outside for a little bit. A few times we've stayed in at recess because it's been too cold, but we try to pop out even for 15 minutes if administration will let us. Parents are hopefully sending kids with rubber boots. Take a look at that picture. They're getting ready to jump in the mud. So is Becky. So they're ready to go, and they're prepared. As the saying goes, there's no bad weather, only poor clothing choices.
Absolutely. The big thing here is that outdoor learning does not have to be about the outdoors. One of the things that I've never been confident about is really just being outside, knowing about the outdoors. I don't naturally, I'm not curious about plants and trees and animals. I don't like bugs and all those things. And so this was a saying that was said to me, that you just have to get outside. You just have to be in the outdoors. And those other things sort of start to come.
I was noticing some of the comments that were written, and I do want to address them. A wagon is a great idea. We have a wagon, not even for students who might have a physical disability or some challenges, but we call them our pokey pokes. We have a few pokey pokes this year, and the students actually pull them either in the wagon or on the sled during winter. So we try to get them to walk for most of the time, but if they're lagging far behind, it actually, the students who are up at the front are having to wait longer and then are standing in the cold. So it's beneficial that we try to keep everybody moving together.
And one of the things you have in place with your wagon, are they called so Tanya, in their class, they have jobs, and one of the jobs is transportation.
Yes.
And so, well, you tell us about what happens when it's pretty funny to watch them try and get that wagon up a hill.
The transportation crew, they're in charge of pulling wagons or sleds for that week. So I just love, I'm sure if parents watch me, they'd be thinking, geez, this teacher doesn't do anything, because the students bring everything. They want to help, and it's good for them, and they feel so accomplished when they can solve a problem. Just yesterday, they were trying to pull this huge, we have a new wagon, a huge wagon through the mud, and they needed to ask for help. So more students came, and they did it. And I took pictures of them doing it.
And it's amazing to see how those things, they really do find themselves within our program expectations, right? All of those things are accessible to us, and we can use that for our communication of learning, for sure.
Sure.
Do you want to talk about these two pictures, Tanya?
Sure.
About bringing some of your inside materials outside?
So one barrier that was not mentioned that is one of the first barriers for me is the amount of things that we sometimes have to cart in and out of the room. So as I mentioned, we start our day outside, and sometimes we'll stay in the kindergarten enclosed space. So that's bringing out blankets and the art cart. Sometimes it's the water table to wash the babies, or just for sensory water. One day they asked to bring out the big blocks and the dress-up clothes. So we said, sure, why not? Whatever you can do inside, you can do outside. So it just may mean a few more minutes of organizing what you want to bring out. But as I mentioned, the students want to do it. They figured out to bring the chair out to carry the blocks in. And while there's 28 of them, they can easily pick a few things up and head inside with it. We use the enclosed space in the kindergarten yard as an extension of our classroom. So we do guided reading outside. We do writing outside. They might bring out the Lego. Most of the things that we want to bring outside have wheels on them, so that will help with transporting materials.
And the students are like, they're good about taking care of the materials that are out there too. So that's been something that has been intentionally taught in Tanya's class and supported, so that they do know how to handle those things and be responsible with them, so they're not destroyed outside either.
So this slide is just an extension of the enclosed space. This is still our kindergarten pen, and we use it in all seasons. And things that you might not think to bring out, like the parachute. Usually you think of a large field that you might need, but they enjoy that in the pen as well, or in the enclosed area as well. And that first picture with the parachute actually led to discussion about light and dark colors, because they were noticing how the colors were darker because of the sunshine, etc. And using outdoor materials to further math concepts. We had this great 10 frame made by a parent, and it's perfect for having a large group outside.
And it's really engaging, right, for students. All those gross motor skills that they're starting to use to solidify those concepts is pretty phenomenal. And it's amazing how oftentimes students who are struggling to listen inside, they can sit outside and be a part of that. They don't necessarily struggle in that same way, and that's because they don't have the stress of either the uncomfortable carpet or they have free space, so they can stand and be spread out. They're not all shoved kind of close together.
In our school, we have actually 4 classes of kindergarten students who start out outside in the day. So we're actually vying for property sometimes on the kindergarten yard. One class walks the track. I was noticing that somebody mentioned walking the track. And then there's 3 others, and they may head out or stay in the enclosed area and do some work. So, and we're really working with the students to be respectful of each group, because we may have a group at the back that is singing a song. We may be working on math concepts, and another class is lining up ready to go for a walk. So we're trying to work on being respectful of each other's needs.
Yeah, Catherine, it's really amazing. Even when you're trying to do a read aloud outside, students it's hard to stand while you're on the carpet and do a read aloud, but it's not hard for those students to stand while they're outside. And it's pretty amazing how they're able to attend and listen in different ways, for sure.
I will say one thing about being outside and kind of those routines that we're establishing. I will say lining up is we don't want to ask the students to be in line too long. So when the bell rings, we're there, because that's when difficulties happen. So they get a lot of time outside, but when it is time to come in, we try to eliminate how long they're standing in line.
That's such a good point. Even for going inside, not having to, the more expectations we ask them to attend to before we actually get to the concept that we want to teach or for them to really take part of, we're taking away all their energy. We're sort of sucking them dry. And something as simple as lining up can do that. Of course, there's times where lining up needs to happen, but just rethinking that. When does it need to happen and why does it need to happen?
Exactly. No one likes lining up, not even adults.
True that.
So this is just an example of using those morning meetings or afternoon times to do a quick math concept or literacy activities. Exactly what you would do inside for circle time or carpet time, you can do outside. Both of these examples just happened. We brought out the 10 frame and we were packing the balls away, and we thought, well, let's see what happens when we introduce them together. A student brought in some tulip bulbs to plant, and they spilled on the ground, and the students started to subitize and talk about what they see. So you just have to be open and willing to go with the flow.
One of the amazing things that you'll see throughout this is just how Tanya documents the learning in the outside and how that's happening. So that's one of the biggest, that's another barrier that we didn't actually see posted earlier, was how do we document the learning that's happening outside. And you can see how she's doing that.
So we started with the enclosed space. So I kind of think of it as circles. So especially as the students are very egocentric and we want to keep the learning, and they want to keep the learning about them. So we start with an enclosed area. So all of September, we're only in 2 areas. So the first week or 2, we're staying in the enclosed area. By the second week, I've started to understand my learners. They're getting to know us, and we're keeping an eye on who may be the ones to wander a bit more. And we're going to introduce them to the larger schoolyard. So in the larger schoolyard, we have a sandbox and some things for the students to climb on, tires and kind of branches stuck in the ground. That doesn't sound right, but anyways, it's something for them to climb, and some armor stones that they can play in. So that is an opportunity for them to step out of the enclosed area, and they're given a bit more freedom to move around and participate with different friends. Sit spot is also introduced at this time, where we can try to work with them, and it may only be 1 or 2 minutes where they sit alone and they're noticing what they hear or what they see or what they feel.
Great point about tarp. So a 10 frame using a dollar store tarp and masking tape.
Oh.
Super durable, absolutely. You can make 100s grid as well out of that, or just a regular grid for coding. So you can start to think about directionality and all those sorts of things that can go inside and outside as well.
Sharing the larger schoolyard with other classes. One day I looked out and there were 7 different classes on the yard, and I thought, well, it's a good problem to have, I guess, if we're jockeying for position on the yard. And I'm sure some of them will be going in when the colder weather comes.
The other thing I've seen, I'm not sure if I'm sure your class has done this too, but making connections between the older grades and the younger grades. It's pretty incredible to watch how those grades start to play together. And many times educators are willing to partner up because they know the value of that as well. So it doesn't have to be everyone finding their own space all the time. Sometimes it can be, what can we plan together, and how can we plan together?
As I mentioned, we have several kindergarten classes who are outside. So oftentimes we're heading in the same direction. Oh, we're going for a walk, or we're heading to the forest too. So we just team up, and then friends get to play with other friends that they might not see often.
Tricia, I would love for you to share some of your strategies as well for out there with 9 kindergarten classes and how you make that work as well. Yeah, that's
wow.
Wowie. Very cool. One of the things that, again, Tanya's mentioned it before, but thinking about our small group learning and how that happens outside as well. So it doesn't have to be just us standing and watching. It doesn't just have to be us running a game, right? It can be students doing self-directed activities, or students working together on something, and then one educator pulling a small group, right? Those things can be happening outside. There's nothing to say that it has to just be either a free-for-all, or that it has to just be us supervising students while we're outside. I think we have an obligation really to be involved in what's happening out there, and that's where we can add to their play and respond and challenge and extend the learning that's happening.
When we're outside, if one of the educators is working with a small group, we do have the other one who is floating and playing and monitoring, so that we can be on top of things and making sure we're aware of what's going on. Also, somebody mentioned the daycare preschoolers and teaming up with that. That's fantastic. We also see our daycare quite often. We say hi to them and we share the same spaces sometimes, but I like the idea of going with them to what they're doing.
I really like that too, in terms of, because those will be your kindergarten students, right? And so we're getting them ready really for supporting that transition into kindergarten by making them feel comfortable and start to develop relationships as well. You'll see too in the pictures that we've already had, like T, to have some of the materials that Tanya and her partner provide for the students. So they have lots of opportunity to use lots of different materials outside in lots of different ways as well. So a lot of these things you'll see can be used inside, but are used in much different ways outside. That snow painting is really cool.
And I don't like to cart a whole lot. I mean, it depends on the day. We do bring a lot of materials to the outdoor classroom because there's a great sandbox and lots of opportunities for students to explore sand and creating things, and there's pots and pans and whatnot. But we're not going too far. That's in the schoolyard. As far as heading onto the fields and that, I don't want to cart too many things.
Yep.
And if you have no materials, you can still have a good time. So I love the morning sunshine, and you know, so many things can be talked about, can be discovered with shadows and an inquiry into that.
Yeah, good points. So pictures of the outdoor sandbox, it's really just, do you know how big that is?
Oh,
it's huge. Just a huge square, really, filled with sand, right? And it's, in many schools, we have those in our kindergarten, like within the kind of kindergarten yards. But at Tanya's school, it's outside and accessible to all of the students, correct? At recess, which is, or at other times during the day, which is actually really cool as well.
Yeah, and there'll be kids in grade 4 and 5 still in the sandbox at recess time. They love it when the kindergarten kids finally get to go to the big yard, because we bring all the diggers and shovels and things. So again, moving that circle out, we went from an enclosed space where we have a bit more control of what the students are doing and getting to know our learners, developing trust, and then we moved out to the outdoor classroom and the schoolyard, and now we're ready to possibly hit the forest. So again, this is several weeks or a month into getting to know students and what they're going to need. I certainly wouldn't be heading into the forest the first week of school. You really have to get to know your class, and they have to trust you because you're taking them off property possible. And not many students, or sorry, not many classes maybe have access to a forest. So we're cognizant of that, and that's why we wanted to show, you know, what you can do in your enclosed space and what you can do in the kindergarten yard. If you do have access to green space, heading into the forest is magical.
Yes.
And it's scary. The first time I took kids into the forest, I had, first of all, it was difficult for them to walk on uneven ground. They hadn't walked often on anything except lawn and sidewalks. So there was a lot of tripping, and some students were scared. They had never been in there. That was my very first class. The great part is that the year 2s teach the year 1s. So they are now confident and competent in the forest and can help them. And their enthusiasm rubs off onto the younger students as well.
And Tanya, can you talk about some of the processes you have in place to get to the forest in terms of permission?
So anything that is off property, we have a blanket permission form that parents would sign off on and allows us to go off property for community walks or to the forest and another green space that we have. And that allows us to go at any time. So with the 2 educators, because it's close to our school, we can go there without setting up too much with volunteers, etc. There is another space that we go to with the creek, and we require another permission form and volunteers to come with that because there's a water source there. Awesome. I was just going to speak to planning activities in the forest. I do not. And there's a few reasons why I don't like to, it's not that I don't plan activities. We don't bring materials to the forest often. For one, it's just a huge loose parts area. It's brilliant. There's rocks and branches and sticks that they can build with, and they just love it. Another reason is when you're bringing more materials, you're kind of monitoring it a bit more or supporting them a bit more, and your eyes may not be scanning and checking out how everybody is doing. In the forest, students need to ask permission to climb, and we talk about climbing. We aren't talking about climbing straight up a tree. We're talking about trees that are kind of laying down, and they would just be on a bit of an incline. But students still have to ask to climb, and we'll talk. Is today a good day? Well, we're wearing rubber boots today because it had rained. I think that might not be safe. Or the ground is still frozen, but we don't have any snow. We're not climbing today. If we fall, it's very hard.
It's amazing to watch in Tanya's class too, as the students become, they know many of them, not all of them, but many of them kind of know their limits. So they know what they're capable of, and they also know how to push themselves just a little bit, but not too far. So they're learning, and that's been intentionally supported and taught by Tanya, because they're starting to understand beneficial risk, right? That it's what I know is safe. I can take a risk, but I know that where too far, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. We talk about that feeling in your tummy when you're doing something that feels a little bit risky, and that once you get that feeling, that might be far enough for you. And I'm sure we all know students who don't get those butterfly feelings, that don't get those funny feelings, and we have to be the barometer for them. So when the student is climbing, I may have to say, okay, that's high enough, that's making me feel a little uncomfortable watching you, so I think that's far enough for you. Talking about planning activities, what we usually do is we head to what we call the campfire, and the students have just set up a little seating area, and that's where we usually meet. And we might do a little game. I might tell a story of how robin got a red breast, or how squirrel got its stripes. And then they're able to go and play on their own once we've decided what they can do that day.
And I've seen as well in Tanya's class how they they build on one day to the next. So they had started building a shelter, and then one little guy had gone home and created a birdhouse to add to the shelter, so they brought that back the next day, and then they added bird seed to that. So it is building on, they do build on each other, but it really does come from the students and really is led by the students.
Mm-hmm. And just based on what's there, I mean, the forest will provide for them what they need. Just some more pictures from the forest. This is kind of the sitting area, and they were drumming this particular day, and a woodpecker answered their call. So of course we went and hunted for the woodpecker and saw it and watched it for a little bit.
Those inquiries they just build off each other, right? You can't, no matter what you plan, that is magic. You can't do anything more for that.
Mm-hmm.
Wondering too, Tanya, about risk assessment. So making sure that the forest is a safe space, and how do you keep up with that as well?
So I live in the area of the school, so I know this forest, but the first time I took students, or the first time I was preparing to take students in, I had to walk it first. So you're looking for garbage, debris, fencing that might hurt them, and be prepared for that, because you don't want to be walking in with 28 kids and there's some barbed wire fence that's rolled up. We also bring tongs with a garbage bag, so if there is garbage there, we don't want the students touching them, so we just use tongs from the dollar store and clean up the area and keep anything that may be broken and hazardous to them. As we've been going to the forest, it's changed. We had a windstorm a couple of years ago, so some of the branches are down. You have to keep an eye on those things and talk to the students about where they can and can't play that day, depending on what's happening. This is a decaying forest, so a lot of our trees are coming down. So I walk in often and check it out before I bring in the students.
And the last question is how you call them back.
So I have a duck call that I sometimes use. I've also seen people use a wolf call. So they'll howl like a wolf, and then the students will call them back. Most of the time I just yell, "All right, come down from your perches," and we head to the trail to line up, and they notice when we're leaving, and they hustle too.
And is there an expectation as well about how far they can go? Do they have to still see you, or?
Yes, so we talk about that at the very beginning. So you can go as far as you can, as long as you can see me and I can see you. Sometimes I like to take a small group, and I'll take them to the far end of the forest where we can't see or hear the rest of the group. So my partner knows that I've taken X number of students, and I challenge them to take us back to campfire, but going a different way. So it's really amazing to watch and see what they do. So they're listening, they're trying to orient themselves. So this is a great activity for them to, what will they do if they get lost? They have to know their surroundings, and not necessarily with us, but in the neighborhood if they're playing with friends. What do you notice that, where are the houses? Where's the school? Can you see that? Can you hear that?
That's like literally the perfect segue to our next slide on community and the importance of knowing. One of the important things about this is understanding your role, where you live within your community. This is I just love working in the community with the students. I mean, I live near this community, so I'm familiar with it. So that's part of it. If you're coming from a long way away to the school, you may have to do a bit more work in getting to know what's around you. But as we expand our circle more, we're looking at walking in the neighborhood, finding out what's in the community that you can explore with your students. And parents are included in this. So as we go farther outside the school
area, we do require parent volunteers, but it's perfect because they know they're getting to know the neighborhood with their families. As students are working in the neighborhood, just the other day we went honestly 2 blocks, and they'd read so much environmental print. They're noticing numbers. I love when they say, oh, I know this street. If you go down here and then turn and turn again, that's my house. It's wonderful that they can start to orient themselves and understand where they are in relation to where they live and play and stores in the area.
And if you think back to that map that we showed you at the beginning about how far students nowadays are going, right? 300 meters. What Tanya's doing is supporting them, understanding their neighborhood and building their confidence with their parents, with their families, to know how far they can go and where things are within their neighborhood.
So the idea of exploring places in the community, not only as structures or buildings, but as developing a sense of community. So this is a Shoppers Drug Mart. We had started a postcard project several weeks before then, and we were sending our postcards. So Manager Kim at Shoppers was very happy to have us come in. She talked to the kids. We mailed our postcards, and we've done this similar things with Domino's Pizza, the flower shop, ice cream shop, and the kids get to know who's working in their neighborhood. What's that song from Sesame Street? Who are the people in their neighborhood?
Kelly, I love that you're the official mail carriers for your school, so that means like collecting the mail for your school or delivering the mail for your school, and it gives them a really important job too, right? Seeing themselves as contributors to that school community. Very cool.
And then think about all the other expectations you're bringing in with math and counting. Yeah, so the postcard project, this was just a in the middle of it, they had created postcards to send literally around the world. China, Bahrain, Egypt, you name it. Peru, yeah. So we're learning about those places and then getting to know how the mail system works. So this was a crazy day. We thought we would have, what a great idea, let's take bikes and scooters and we can go around the neighborhood. It actually was, but it was a great day, and we invited parents around, and students brought their bikes that day. We did a few days of this activity and just went up the trail and down the sidewalks and back to school. They were tired out. I think it's the little guy in the right, talking about community, and Becky mentioned getting the daycare involved. We also invite younger siblings, especially near the end of the year, so that they can start to get used to us and get used to what happens at school. So we'll invite younger siblings. They'll come on to the sandbox with us, or to the forest, or on this particular bike ride, so they can get used to being at big boy and big girl school.
Absolutely, and Tammy, good point about risk and liability. For sure, that it continues to be a barrier. But our school board, we have an excellent health and safety, corporate risk officer at our school board, and her goal and one of her sayings is safe enough to say yes. So she really does work with us and try to support us in figuring out, okay, what are the barriers and how do we get past them? And one of those big ones is permission forms, but we're also making informed and educated decisions. You'll see every child there's ample parent volunteers. Every child has a safe helmet. All those things are in place absolutely to help to support that going forward.
I know of other schools that have brought in police officers to do like a bike and helmet check and then set up a little course. So maybe if you just wanted to stay in your schoolyard and set that up before you go off site, that would be a fun way to involve the parents and get on the bikes. It's a great way to introduce biking before summer comes, when several students are out and about.
Absolutely. And again, it's not about just going straight out there and trying this right away. This is something for sure that Tanya's built up to over the course of the year. One of the biggest things that we need to do is to build the trust with their families and develop those relationships so that they feel confident and comfortable that we have their child's best interest at heart, but that we're also making good choices to support them. And so trust is a very big part of what, and relationship is a very big part of what Tanya does, for sure.
Again, community, we often, when we're going for walks in the neighborhood, we'll stop by families' houses just to say hi, or we've delivered notes if someone's been homesick for a while. At Christmas time, we asked parents, is there anyone in the neighborhood who just had a baby or has been sick for a while, etc., and the students make cards and letters, and then we went and sang Christmas carols to them at their doors for the ones that were close enough that we could walk to.
Could you imagine opening your door to 30 kindergartners singing you a song? That's amazing.
And on those walks, I always say a walk is never just a walk. As I mentioned yesterday, the environmental print that they read, there's so many things that can happen in one short walk. The wonderings, the questions, the connections that they're making. So this is just an example of, and I just taken pictures of what they were talking about, and we would bring them inside to discuss further. But these are all just questions right on the trail.
So then thinking about, well, what does that look like, and how can we connect those two things, being outside and moving inside? And this is just a brain scan. So after 20 minutes of sitting quietly, the activity in your brain, and then after 20 minutes of walking, the activity in your brain. So just thinking about the student who you think will be more attentive to what you're saying, and who will be more receptive to the teaching and more able to learn. You'll notice that that second picture, all those active areas of the brain, they're ready to go, they're ready to learn. They're able to pick up on those things.
When we start out in the morning, often it can be used for students to burn off some of that energy, but in the morning it can also be time to wake up those sleepy brains and those limbs. They may have had a late night or just slowly waking up.
Some of our guys have been at daycare, right, through 7 a.m. and they are tired. They need a little bit of active play to get out and get their bodies moving again, for sure. One of the things good point, Sarah. Also a nice way to brush off any bad mornings at home. My goodness, have you ever had that where everything has gone wrong, right? And so we need that. We need a little bit of a break and a breather to refocus our minds and help us to be ready. So thinking about moving from just covering the kindergarten program, checking off expectations, to thinking about uncovering the learning related to the program. So what is happening outside, and how does that show the expectations that the students are demonstrating? So this is a video from Tanya's class. Actually, you know what? Do you want to explain it? Okay. I've tried to be funny.
So as a class, we had walked to the far forest, and students had noticed mushrooms and fungus growing, and so a small group wanted to explore it a bit further. So there were other groups working on their own inquiries, and this little group went and worked with another teacher in the school to develop a fungus video. This is the fungus group, and they started by making a map, because the teacher who was bringing them had not been to the far forest, so they actually mapped out where to go, because I was not going with them. And they made a map so that they would know, and she was set up with the phone and everything like that. But yeah, we sent off a teacher who didn't know the area with students who did know the area, and a map that they created.
So we'll just let you watch this video. Mally's going to put it up there for us. Love that so much.
Cute are they? And again, I mentioned having the year ones and year twos work together, because they really show and demonstrate and teach each other. So actually 3 of these students were year twos and 2 were year ones, and now they're the big leaders in the class and, you know, lead inquiries and develop ideas, helping the younger students.
And just so you know, that video was made with Adobe Spark, and it's not hard to do. You just, if you can input pictures and videos, they just overlay. So it's not hard to do. Students absolutely can be a part of that for sure.
So many times inquiry is sparked by outside, and how can we bring it indoors and discuss it a bit further? So in this particular case, we were out near the park, and the students saw a poster for a lost dog. So they were actually very concerned about this lost dog, and were examining the poster and trying to read the words and numbers on it. So we took a picture and brought it into the classroom to discuss as a group, as a class, and then this small group wanted to make their own lost posters of a pet or something that they've lost in their home. So this is a great way of using something that they notice outside as a spark to advance some academic expectations. Oh, by the way, the dog was found. One of our parents looks for lost pets, and this dog was found. That's awesome. They were very concerned about it. Another example, we collected leaves one day, and actually the word intact is interesting. Becky and her partner, Crystal Carbino, were with us, and I guess I was giving them examples of leaves to collect, and I said, make sure that they're intact, like this leaf, and I showed one. So one student asked, what does intact mean? And she, of course, questioned him back, what do you think it means? And he thought that it meant whole and beautiful. So when we were inside, he decided to sort the leaves according to how intact they were. Intact, mid-intact, and not intact at all. And some other students sorted them in different ways. Good for jumping in, not good for jumping in. For this is an example this was a great lesson for me on documenting that I really enjoyed doing learning stories, and we've tried many different ways to document our learning. And this was just a quick one. Learning stories and documenting don't have to be weeks long. This was one day we went out to look for evidence that it had rained. We did some pictures, we took some pictures and put it up so that we could review it as a class. So for me, this reminds me that we don't have to plan it out and be weeks into it. It can be a quick way to document quickly something that the students are interested in.
Something that I love about this too is that it's not every student showing rain in the same way. Some students are interested in the drop or maybe the sound that you can see in the sewer grate. Some are interested in the worm. That's something that the evidence there. So it's really incredible to watch that students will gather that knowledge in lots of different ways, and then once you see it up there, then that building happens all together. Not everybody needs to partake in every little aspect of that.
We often use the pictures that we take when we're outside and bring them inside, put them on our projector screen, and ask the students, what do you see? What do you notice? And I love the math behaviors and math language that come out of it. So they're noticing how many people, how many are on each side. This then led to some equations and balancing.
So just a reminder, right, that evidence of learning should be on a child, not on a worksheet. So we want them to come home fully knowing what they've been a part of and what's been going on, not just coming home and bringing something that they've been told to do or made to do. So we had a video there where we only added it in case we did that, in case we needed more material. But we will add that link in the resource page. We'll ask Natalie to do that. It's about the Japanese kindergarten class, and it's built on a circle. And it's just really good to spark some creativity in ourselves. Many of you have probably seen that. And so these are some great resources that can support outdoor education and helping us to get outside and ways we can get outside. And then the Merit Center link down there will support self-regulation, and those will all be on the resource page. Natalie has all the direct links to that. So thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This was my first webinar, and thank you, Becky, for showing me the ropes.
If you have any questions at any time, please feel free to contact us. We have our Twitter information up there, but as well, you're welcome to email us at any time. Thanks, everyone. And any questions will be around for the next little bit. If you pop those in the chat stream, for sure we can respond to that.
Yeah, for sure. I was trying to think if there was anything you would ask that we didn't touch upon. So if you still have questions, go ahead.
Well, yeah, we did forget that if all else fails, new research finds that kids aged 4 to 6 perform better during boring tasks when dressed as Batman. So if you need to keep them inside, dress them up like Batman.
Thanks, Becky and Tanya. That was awesome, really great ideas, and I love all the pictures of the kids playing outside where they should be. So Catherine, a copy of the presentation, I don't think that they provided that, but you'll be given a link to the recording tomorrow, and it will come to you in an email, as well as all of the resources. Just a couple things just before we end the evening. The first one is we really appreciate it if people could fill out the feedback survey, and there's 3 ways to get to it. One of them is by clicking on the link on the slide. The second one, I put the link in the chat box, and the third one is when you log out of the Blackboard room, it'll take you directly to the survey, and if you fill that in, it will then direct you to a link for a certificate for your professional portfolio. As well, there are lots of presentations coming up in the between now and the end of May, and there's pretty much one every evening, sometimes 2. So please take a look at what's available on the OTF Connect website and sign up for